Hi, everybody. How you doing? Thanks for joining us. I am going to be talking about reviews from a business perspective, and it's actually going to be a very interesting conversation because I get calls on this every day. It'll be interesting to hear what your observations and questions are as we go through this. Before I start, though, let me tell you that the New Mexico SBDC has a lot of great COVID resources. We are still in a pandemic. We still have a lot of issues to deal with around that as businesses. So I encourage you to stay informed and know what the laws and issues are around all of that, because you don't want to have to hire me or another lawyer to defend you because you weren't following the rules and regulations like you're required, whether you're political around this or not. At any rate, this presentation is also available to you if you want it. You just need to contact the New Mexico SBDC and they'll give you a copy of it so that you'll have access to all the links that are inside. We are going to talk about online reviews. And I know everybody knows what those are, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail about the issues around that, the legal issues, what you should or shouldn't be doing, and then really how to manage negative reviews. And if I do my job in the next 60 minutes, I think you're going to have a much better understanding of how to leverage reviews, positive and negative, and what your limitations are in controlling those. And then, of course, specifically how to deal with the negative reviews. With all of that said, I am an attorney. I've been an attorney for 30 years, but I'm not your attorney. And New Mexico SBDC is not a law firm. So technically, we can't be giving you legal advice in this presentation. So you need to view it as general advice, not specific advice. And if you run into issues, you should talk with an attorney as appropriate so that they can appropriately advise you. What is an online review? Well, I think we all have some understanding of what reviews are. It helps to understand sort of some of the dimensions to this. And the first sort of group of reviews we have are what I call the horizontal players. You know, they're going to be the Googles, the Yelps, the Bings, the Better Business Bureau, for example, the Yellow Pages, Dex Online. The horizontal players, you know, don't have a specific focus. They are helping everybody. We have the social media players, you know, Facebook and LinkedIn. Nextdoor seems to be a growing thing of importance for certain types of businesses. As important as these are, there's even more important sort of groups or categories of reviews. And that's relating to what I call the vertical players. If you're a lawyer like me, you care about AVO, lawyers.com, FindLaw. There's a few others out there. If you're a contractor, you probably care about Angie's List and Trusted Pros. If you're a medical doctor, or psychiatrist, or a chiropractor or dentist, you probably care about Health Grades and Rate MDs. These types of vertical players for almost every type of business or product. And what you really need to do is figure out what vertical players exist for your industry, profession, or business. You really better know who they are, and you should have some representation if you don't. So as a business owner, right, we all know about the Google reviews because those are the things that pop up when you go to the search engine. But you really need to keep your eye on all of this. And a lot of these, they're not going to email you when a review comes around. You're not going to know about it. So you really need to monitor it depending on the activity of your business, you know, weekly or at least monthly if you're not doing that. And if you're not aware of any vertical players out there, you should. That it could be an important source of leads for you or your business at some point in the future. So you really want to, spend some time and figure that out if you don't know about that already. Let's talk about a review for a moment, and I'm going to be a little academic here. This is sort of, I'm going to lay out a model that I think most people view or think about when we're talking about reviews. And what I picture here is sort of like a chart where on the vertical axis you have from the bottom no or few reviews and ratings, and as you go up you have lots of reviews and ratings. Along the horizontal axis, you have from the left all negative reviews, and on the right, all positive reviews. And most people sort of think like this. They want to go from negative reviews to positive reviews, few reviews to lots of reviews. Pretty simple model, right? The thought here is you don't want to be in box number 1, and you really want to be in box number 2. And then box number 3, of course, is fine, but you want more ratings. You want to get yourself into the box above. And of course, you want to stay out of box number 4, the death box, so to speak. So that's the traditional viewer reviews. And a lot of people sort of focus on that. And here's the problem with this line of thought. One is you can't control either the quality or quantity of reviews. Sure, you can go and hire some sort of firm to go and spam the reviews, and that's just going to create, I think, problems for you. So it's not something that I can recommend or suggest. So really, you're up to, it's kind of, you're reliant on your customer base and people that interact with your business to leave these reviews. It's out of your direct control. The other issue is, and it's a big one, angry or disappointed customers are going to be the ones that want to leave reviews. And the customers that are satisfied or, like your business or otherwise happy with you tend to not leave reviews. So there's this general sort of just human psychology associated with wanting to, provide some sort of retribution. They're angry at your business, so they're going to leave you a negative review. There's going to be a general sort of, I think, sort of weight towards negative reviews in a lot of instances. And it could be a cathartic exercise for the one leaving the review if they're really upset or feel like they were mistreated. Maybe one of your employees had a bad day. It could be a channel to just be heard and connect with others. So there's a lot of reasons here why this traditional review or this traditional view of reviews is problematic for the business. And so I want to talk about that for a minute. I want us to recognize that reviews are critical for the business. You need to think about how it actually works for the business and how you'd take advantage of it. What is a review, right? Well, it's a third-party perspective for potential customers. That's why we businesses care about reviews. If you just think about it again from an academic standpoint, reviews, positive and negative, right or wrong, they give the reader, the general public, and in that segment, your potential next customer, they get a sense of, is this business popular or not? Does this company have an ability to empathize with its customers or the public? Do most folks have a positive or negative experience with the business? Do they care about the customer? What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? This stuff that is in the reviews creates an impression in the mind of the consuming public. Whether you like it or not, whether it's a positive review or a negative review, it's the actual material and content in those reviews that has these impacts. While I'm not saying the score is not important, it is important, but most people look at the comments. They put stock in the comments themselves, and the score is just a quick data point. They're mostly going to make decisions based on what they read in the comments, even with a low score. So yes, you would like a good high score, of course, but I think it's more important to think about the comments themselves. And, what's the good news about that? Well, these are perspectives that you can control and manage if you do it carefully. So while we can't control how many people put up reviews and ratings and what they say and what they do, with some exceptions that I'm going to talk about in a minute, we can control this sort of sense, perception of what people think about the business. And we do that with our replies. So we're going to talk about some of that. I'm going to propose a more progressive view on what reviews are. And I'm going to leave the vertical axis the same. We go from 0 or few ratings on the bottom, and as we go up, we have more reviews or ratings, and so you have fewer lots. But on the horizontal axis, I want to change it from, all negative to all positive. I'm going to change it to no empathy and all empathy. And I want to suggest that where we want to go is empathetic. We want the public to view our business as caring, as meeting the sort of normative expectations of the consuming public that we care about. And so, that means we still want to go to 1 to 2. 3 is fine, but we want to get back up to the top, and we still want to be out of number 4, but we can control all of this. The advantages with this approach then is negative reviews, instead of something to be avoided at all costs, actually have an important role for you. They give you an opportunity to express empathy. Why is that different from a positive review? Well, a positive review is fine, of course, but it's difficult to sort of convey empathy and caring with a positive review without sounding kind of ridiculous. So the negative review actually has an important function here. And you have an opportunity with these reviews to intercede with angry customers or disappointed customers that you may not otherwise have available to you. So my point is as annoying, as angry as a negative review makes you, if you think about it from the standpoint of it's actually fulfilling a purpose, it'll help you take the emotional anger and response out of that review and focus on the long-term benefit for your business. You can maximize public approval in this way by showing empathy, showing you care, evolving your business with the feedback you receive. So here's what's really interesting about reviews, and they're a problem too, right? A negative review can be up there forever. Okay, you've shared empathy, you show your care, you're sorry they had that experience. So now that negative review is 5 years old, and now you have a new negative review. I mean, you could literally say, well, I'm sorry for your experience. We've had time to really work on this, and we think we've really improved, but we're still not 100% there. We're sorry, but we're working on things. It shows an evolution of your business, and people pay attention to that. They make hiring decisions based on that. And finally, the way you approach this can show that your business is relatable. It's accessible. It's not some sort of gigantic company that you can't communicate with. It could be a very valuable exercise for you. Let's step back for a minute. I'm diving into that. I need to share sort of where the rubber meets the road. And this is because every day as a lawyer, I get a call from a small business saying they are really angry because of a negative review and they were lying, they, fill in the blank, and they want to hire a lawyer to go after them. And the problem is we lawyers are expensive, and we lawyers cannot promise a result. We can certainly try, and we're going to try, but you need to understand what the issues here, what the issues are, so that you can make an appropriate decision on whether you want to spend a ton of money with us or you want to spend a little bit of money dealing with your online persona. And so I'm going to give you some frameworks around this, so it basically educates you on what people can or can't say and how they can or can't say it, so you have a better idea of whether you should pick up the phone and hire a lawyer or you should take a different tack. So let me start off by giving you a little bit of legal framework here. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is people are entitled to their opinions, period. End of story. We cannot control people and their opinions, period. We can't, don't even try. But we can stop false statements of fact. That is a problem. So let's discuss what that stuff is. What is an opinion? I don't like this place. The people are rude. The food is gross. They are racist. They didn't do what I asked. He is an angry man. I was afraid of him. He doesn't know what he's doing. So these feel like facts, don't they? But they're not. They're opinions. Why are they opinions? Well, let's do the one, they are racist. The word racist is very inflammatory, not denying that, but it's not well defined. It's a bit subjective depending on the players and the participants. So it's not a legal definition that we can hang our hat on. Therefore, it's an opinion. Rude, what does that mean? Is somebody just in a hurry? Is that rude? Did somebody not say, or maybe they didn't hear a customer say hi, and so they didn't acknowledge the hello, and so now they're viewed as rude, right? It's a very subjective phrase. Even he is an angry man. I was afraid of him. Angry man, what does that mean? Is it somebody who just isn't very friendly? Is it somebody that was raising his fist and his face is all red? Was it because somebody stepped on his toe? I mean, the word angry, again, is very subjective and, very contextualized. I was afraid of him. Well, okay, that's your opinion. These aren't false statements of fact. Maybe they're lying. Maybe they had a great experience. Maybe nobody was rude, but they still said somebody was rude. They could be lying about their opinion, but it's still nothing we can do about it. Okay? So opinions, people are entitled to their opinions, right or wrong, period. False statements of fact. That's different. So let's give you some examples of those. They are colorblind. They stole from me. They are crooks. They discriminated against me when they didn't, right? We have to have, the negative here. So they're lying about discrimination. It's a scam. Now, scam actually is a legal term of art. That means a fraudulent enterprise. So fraudulent, fraud, that's a very specific legal definition. They never delivered when they did. The products are defective when they are not. They threatened me when they didn't. All of these things are false statements of fact. And it could be confusing because sometimes it could almost feel like opinions, or opinions can almost feel like false statements of fact. The difference here is these words I used have very specific legal definitions. Colorblind is a very specific definition. Stole, stealing, theft, larceny, legal definition for it. Crooks, that is implying, people who commit criminal activity. These words are actionable. They are false statements of fact if they're not true. All these opinions could actually be false statements of fact if the interaction never occurred. An example would be a family member or something, and I've had this, where I've had a business client with one of their customers having a bad experience, and they go and tell all their family and friends to leave negative reviews too. So the friends and family, they aren't entitled to an opinion because they didn't have the experience. So that then could be a false statement of fact. Thoroughly confused yet? I get confused all the time myself. You really got to dive into the details. And when I talk to clients, they won't give me the exact phraseology, right? They will more communicate or paraphrase. And the paraphrase has an emotional anger element to it. So when I got to go and read the actual review, I find this is really an opinion. I'm happy to take your money and fight this, but it's a lost cause. This really comes down to what is actionable, right? If you're going to hire a lawyer, what can the lawyer do? Well, what we lawyers can do as it relates to false statements of fact is a legal tort called defamation. And it's actionable. Actionable from a lawyer means we can file a lawsuit. We can get a judge involved and do something about it. We lawyers call it a prima facie case. What defines a prima facie case for defamation? Well, it requires four things. It requires, 1, a false statement purporting to be a fact. 2, a publication or communications to a third person. So if somebody calls you a crook to your face, is that defamation? No, because there's no publication to a third party. It's just to you. 3, some level of intent, meaning they intended to make the false statement purporting to be a fact and publishing it somehow. Intent is important. If it's an accident, that's not actionable. If it's negligent, negligence is a form of intent that could potentially be actionable. And then the big one here, damages, or at least some harm to the person or the company, the entity that was subject to the false statement. Damages, we're going to talk about some of these here in a moment. It's really interesting how this comes together in terms of what you as the business leader have available to you in a legal arsenal to deal with something like this. I want to explain what there's, 2 types of defamation here that you've probably heard of. One is slander. That's the spoken or written, oral communications, not written down. Written is libel. So defamation is the big category, and it has 2 subcategories: slander for oral and libel for written. I said false statements effect is defamation and is actionable, but there's some real buts here that you need to understand. A false statement purporting to be a fact, it becomes a proof problem if you wanted to sue on this. And remember, truth is always an absolute defense, by the way. So if it's true, it's not a false statement, right? So here's a question: how do you disprove the negative, right? If somebody said there were roaches in the restaurant and there weren't roaches in the restaurant, well, how do you prove that? So it's not always easy to prove. And the answer is by providing contradictory evidence. But roaches in, the restaurant, okay, there's no roaches now. That doesn't necessarily mean there weren't any roaches earlier. The only real way you can contradict that is by having other people in the restaurant at the same time to be able to prove, meaning in a court of law with a jury that they were lying. Or maybe they admit they lied to somebody and were stupid enough to put in an email that you have access to. Yeah, you might be able to prove that then. But why is that a problem? Well, because it's hard. And when you hear a lawyer say hard, think expensive. Okay? When a lawyer says easy, it's the opposite. Then think less expensive. But this is hard, therefore expensive. And so the big question here is, do you have the proof? And is it worth the time and effort? And that's just dealing with the statement itself. We have other issues in the prima facie case. One is intent. And, one big thing I get all the time is, well, I want to sue Google. I'm like, don't get me wrong. I've had people say, oh, are you afraid because they're too big of a company? No, I love that. I want to sue the biggest damn company there is because I get paid for it. So the bigger they are, the harder it is. And remember what I told you, when a lawyer says hard, think expensive. So we can make a lot of money trying to sue Google. The question is, are you an infinite well of money that you would like to just throw at the lawyer versus maybe throw at your business, right? I mean, that's the big question and the big issue here. But as it relates to suing Google, you need to understand, or any of these companies, better, the BBB is a big one. I get a lot of people that want to sue the BBB. There's 2 things you need to know. One is, you can't sue them for 2 reasons. One is, what is their intent? Did they intend to make any false statements of fact? No, they're not intending to do that. Worst case is they're not willing to take something down. So then can we impute upon them the publication requirement and intent necessary because they're unwilling to take something down? That's a great argument, and that's something that I'd love to take your money and go fight in a court of law for, except there's one other problem, and that's this, what's called the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, CDA for short. And basically it permits internet service providers, ISPs, to host user-generated content, i.e. reviews, without substantial risk of liability. So if I were to take your money and go sue, we're going to get the lawsuit dismissed because they're going to claim they have no liability under Section 230. That is a hard stop against the providers. You really need to be thinking about, the individual folks making the statements. Let's talk about those guys. It's going to relate to damages, I think, in terms of how much money you're going to throw at this to go after these people. The question is damages, how do you value your damages? Are they speculative? If they're speculative, the courts are not going to award those kinds of damages. They do not award speculative damages. And most of the time, what I hear from a business owner is, well, I've had a loss in business. I'm like, what does that mean? Well, I think I don't have as much revenues as I should have been. Okay, you said you think. How much? How can we prove and show that? And how can we show that it's actually a loss of revenue attributed to the negative review versus the general, cyclical ups and downs that happen in the marketplace? It's a very difficult argument when you talk about that. Now, if you are in the type of business where you are, let's say, doing big jobs with individual proposals, and so maybe you have 1, 3, 10 customers a month, and you could show that you were about to sign somebody up, and in fact did sign somebody up, and then they reneged on their contract because of the negative review. If you can actually prove all of that, okay, well now we have damages that's probably not speculative relating to that particular work. But notice all the ifs I put in there. If they've already signed, like if they didn't sign, then why didn't they sign? Was it because of the review? Was it because they just decided not to do it? Was it because they didn't have the money? Right? So that just because somebody didn't sign doesn't necessarily mean you have a prima facie case and that you can prove the damages. However, with that said, there's something called libel or slander per se. Per se basically is the false statements are so damaging, so harmful, they're automatically presumed to have done harm. Don't need to prove damages. We just know it's harmful, and therefore we don't have to go on the damages side. Now, per se is a very narrow area, but you need to know it. One is somebody says something about criminal activity. So if you are the subject of a false claim of some sort of criminal activity, that would be slander or libel per se, and we don't need to prove damages on that. Another category is a loathsome disease or contagious or infectious disease. That one's interesting, isn't it? Given especially that fact that we're in a pandemic. And I honestly don't know which way we're going to fall with that. If somebody says, oh, they're all, it's a COVID shot. I'm making something up here. Is that slander per se? Or because we're in the pandemic, everybody, there's a large percentage of the population that is catching the disease. Is it going to be the other way and viewed as not per se slander or libel? I haven't seen any cases come out. I expect them to be coming out at some point. So it'd be interesting to see where the courts come out on that. There's two others though. One is unchaste or engaged in some sort of form of sexual misconduct. And finally, some sort of behavior that's incompatible with the proper conduct of business, trade, or a profession. So this one's an interesting one for businesses, but it still needs to be egregious. So, for example, if somebody were to say, if you were a restaurant and said you use false ingredients, they make some sort of claim about the ingredients in your food when it's otherwise. That could be a problem if it's egregious. There's, let's say I'm a lawyer and they say that I commit legal malpractice and I intentionally steal clients' money. Well, that would be per se libel or slander because it would affect me and my profession. That's a pretty egregious thing for lawyers to do, is take clients' money that doesn't belong to them. But it's got to be egregious. And if they do that, it is actionable. But the question becomes, do you really want to sue? Even if it's actionable, even if you have slander or libel per se. And why is that? Well, number one is the lawsuit is expensive and your insurance isn't going to pay for it. This is money out of your pocket. My favorite quote to everybody I talk to about this is, I'm happy to take your money, but is this money well spent for you? And why is that? Well, first, retainer starts at $10,000. Now, other lawyers are going to have different retainer amounts. You might be lucky and find a lawyer willing to jump onto this for $5,000, and a lot of lawyers are going to want even more than the $10,000. A libel case, as such as this, can easily cost $50,000 or more against somebody who can defend themselves. Now, what about somebody who can't defend themselves? Well, you're going to still spend 10 grand or more trying to get what's called a default judgment. This is a judgment against somebody who's not even defending themselves at all. They're not putting up a fight. We still got to spend money because we got to go to court, and then the judge isn't just going to do what we ask. We have to convince the judge. So we still have to present our evidence, and then the judges hate default judgments. So they're going to be a really tough critic. We're going to have to show them that even notwithstanding the evidence, that there's enough here to show that they violated the law in order to issue a default judgment. So it's a lot of work. And then assuming you get the default judgment, how do you get paid? How do you collect? We might not even know where this guy or gal is. We're going to have to find them. We're going to have to try and collect, hoping they're not bankrupt, hoping they're located in the US, not somewhere else. So there's a lot here that you have to think about when you want to sue somebody. Don't forget, people will publish the lawsuits. They'll publish the demand letters. And so I've been in instances where I have sent a demand letter out, and they go and use that as a reason why the business is such a bully, and how they go and sick their lawyer on them and pour them, and and all of this stuff. So there's a lot of potential ramifications that can cause harm to the business, even with a lawsuit like this. We've had to deal with anonymous posts, and those aren't easy because we can find out who they are, but we have to go and subpoena everybody. So let's say it's a Google review by an anonymous poster. We got to go and subpoena Google for the underlying metadata information, hoping that it still exists, because those providers don't keep it forever. So we got to find the underlying data, and then we find out, okay, there's a Yahoo email address associated with this. So now we got to go and subpoena Yahoo and hope that they have the relevant information associated with that email address. And let's say we get it, and it's a Comcast address. Okay, now we got to go and subpoena Comcast and hope Comcast has the right information. And usually Comcast will, because it was a client, customer existing or prior, but it's still a lot of work. You got to send those subpoenas, and if they go and try and file a motion to quash, you got to fight that. So you can easily spend $10,000 or more trying to identify a real culprit. And of course, hopefully they're in the US, right? If they're in Russia, what are we going to do? I guess hire a Russian attorney and see if we can, keep chasing that down. I have not had the experience in doing that. Usually we find out that they're in Indonesia or Russia or Ukraine or something, and then that kind of ends our pursuit. Now you know kind of the legal framework. And while you can take advantage of the law to go after people, I hope you are understanding that it's expensive and the results are very uncertain. So what I'm proposing is, as much as I want to take your money and fight people, I think there's a better way to handle this. And especially given that model that I told you about, the progressive model where you want to take advantage of the negative reviews. And so the thought here is, when you're responding to negative reviews, you're really not responding to the individual. You're responding to the whole world. And you want to frame your responses appropriately. And here is my recommendation. And if you were to Google how to respond to negative reviews, you're going to get a lot of different opinions, but I think they all generally coalesce around what I'm suggesting here. And that is, you respond quickly. And the only way you're able to do that is if you're actively monitoring. As I mentioned in the very beginning, you're not going to get notices all the time. So you need to actively monitor the important sites that you think are relevant to your business. When you do respond, you need to acknowledge the complaint. There's no way around that. You need to apologize and empathize. You don't need to agree, but you need to apologize and show empathy. You need to take responsibility and don't cast blame. You don't want to blame anybody, not even employees. Just take responsibility. Provide an explanation if warranted or appropriate, and keep it short and simple. Make it right, again, if warranted and or if possible and if it makes sense. Let's talk through some scenarios for you. The first one here is, I don't like this place. What would be one possible response? Well, I would start off by saying, I'm sorry to hear you don't like our store. We're not agreeing. We're not, pointing blame. We're just immediately, we're sorry you had that experience. We're sorry that it wasn't to your liking. It wasn't meeting your expectations. It needs to be in your own words. The goal here is for you to feel like a real person that the rest of the public can empathize with and like. We aren't for everyone, but we hope if you love Western wear, I'm just making up a store here. This could be if you love cupcakes or if you love Cinnabons, you'll love our selection. We're actively trying to expand our inventory, but they say our supply is being impacted by the pandemic. So here we took responsibility. We're not casting blame, although we're kind of suggesting maybe the pandemic's making things a little hard for us to have a really complete inventory. Now we're assuming that that's why they didn't like us. There was something wrong with our inventory. Usually we're going to have a general idea of why this customer had the opinion they had. And I think you should address it head on. And if there's a way to explain it, I think we should do it. And we're keeping it short and simple here. And then making it right by throwing out, a carrot of some sort. In this case, if you give us another chance, please come by for a 10% coupon. Thank you for checking out our place, and I'm sorry it didn't meet your expectations. So just think about the emotion here from you, and you are definitely going to want to reword this, and you're going to have your own spin and take on things. But if you were to read this, how do you feel about the owner? Do you kind of feel like you agree with the person who says they don't like this place? Or do you kind of feel for the store owner, right? I mean, that's the point. You're trying to make a connection, a social connection with the people that are going to read these reviews. Let's take the opposite review, the really inflammatory one. These people are crooks. And I had a review as a lawyer with this kind of review. And here was the answer. I'm sorry you feel that way. As the business owner subject to attack, what I wanted to say was, F you and the monkey you came in here with, right? But that would not be appropriate. And that would be a great way to sort of reinforce I'm an idiot at the very least. But we say, I'm sorry you feel that way. We acknowledge, we apologize, we empathize. I clearly don't agree. We do our best to help people, although we cannot help everyone. It really does depend on the circumstances. Unfortunately, it costs us money to help, even if we're ultimately unsuccessful. We're very well respected in the business, and we did tell you your case was going to be difficult, expensive, with a low probability of success. In this particular case, I explained what happened, and furthermore, I let the whole world know that we told this guy ahead of time that this probably wasn't going to work. It makes this guy look bad. And it looks, the hope here is, it makes me look like a normal attorney just trying to do their job and understands that the client's upset, but there's really nothing we can do about it, and it's not our fault. In terms of making it right, here's what I said. Once we lost the verdict, we did waive subsequent legal fees to close the matter. I'm sorry we couldn't get a better result for you. What else can I do? Now, the word crook is slander or libel per se. Libel because it's written per se. So it is considered something that I don't have to prove damages. And I can certainly sue them for this. But even as a lawyer, I have better things to do with my time than go and chase somebody like this down. And he's actually doing me a favor because I think he kind of looks like an idiot. When you have such inflammatory language like this, most of the population is going to kind of rebel from that. They're going to be put off from that. And then when you come back with a very sane, logical, concise, empathetic response, you end up looking like the better party here and more accessible to the public. So let's do one more of these. They did a poor job, but it's not your customer. My response would be, I'm sorry you feel that way, but you're not our customer. End of story. This is a false, bad review that you shouldn't be doing. Get lost. But we're not going to say that. What we're going to do is turn into an ad for our business. We take pride in our people who work hard at meeting customer requests and expectations. We have hundreds of customers who come back repeatedly because they prefer our work ethic, standards, and performance. So, now you're not our customer. You're not entitled to that opinion, but here's who we are. We're great people. We do great work. Give us a call. And I'm going to close it by saying, perhaps if you actually do business with us someday, you'll change your mind and update this review. I think we're entitled to have a little bbit of humor in some of these responses, especially when they're ridiculous because they haven't even done any business with us. And it's up to you. Again, it needs to be in your own words and the way you think about things. Turn this around into a positive. And it's interesting because that headline, that review, they did a poor job, is going to catch people's attention. But then the moment they read your response, it's going to totally flip the feeling, the emotion that the reader has, and you're going to turn that into a positive and bonus for you and your business. I'm finding every year the internet is more and more important for businesses, even for those businesses who say that the internet's not that important. I think that people are using reviews and ratings more and more frequently. And I'm seeing searches for company name space ripoff and your company's name space reviews. Do that. See what comes up and take control of the narrative. And like I said earlier, as a lawyer, I'm happy to take your money and fight, the biggest names there are on the planet. But that's not really going to help your business long-term and strategically. I think you should focus on the process that I've recommended here and control that narrative and build your business.